I knew we were in trouble the morning a stranger in a navy windbreaker stapled a red tag to my framing like he owned the hillside. He didn't say hello or show a badge, just pressed that paper flat with the heel of his hand and told me I was shut down by order of the marshal's office. And when I said, "Which marshal?" he blinked, glanced past me at the view our house would hold for the next 50 years, and ran. My name's Miles Harper, and this whole mess started with a parcel nobody wanted, a stony little wedge of ridge behind a subdivision called Mesa Ridge, the kind of lot that scares off sensible folks because the driveway alone looks like a geometry problem. My wife, June, saw it first. She stood on the scrubby crest in a gust that tasted like dust and sage and said, softly but certain, "This is the one." We did the slow, boring work surveys, permits, soils reports, sightline studies because we planned to do the thing right. And somewhere in those months of forms and signatures, I started to believe the house would teach me patience. I'd been building for other people for 20 years. This one was ours. The first time I met Sylvia Crane, the president of the Mesa Ridge Homeowners Association, she came up my gravel drive like she'd fired the starting gun on a parade. White visor, binder tucked like a hymn book, two men trailing behind her with crossed arms. "Views," she said by way of greeting. Mesa Ridge was promised views. She flipped to a page labeled View Corridors, finger tapping like a metronome. "Your roofline will cut off Sunset A." I told her our lot wasn't part of Mesa Ridge, that the county had signed off on height, that the survey stakes marked our boundary, not hers. She smiled a kind of pitying smile. "Law is one thing," she said. "Community is another." That night, the subdivision's Facebook page lit up with words like selfish and ridge thieves, and by morning a homemade sign at the bottom of the hill read, "Keep the sky open." I'm not going to pretend it didn't sting. You work honest, you expect folks to give you the benefit of the doubt. Instead, June and I started buying coffee in the next town over because the barista we knew suddenly found the floor real interesting when we walked in. Then came the red tag. Paper looked official at a glance, big serif letters, a seal that smudged when my thumb touched it. No case number. I snapped photos, called the county, and got connected to a man whose chuckle had seen too much. "Nope," he said. "Not us. Not anyone in this county." He told me to file a police report and, as an afterthought, to keep the fake tag in a sandwich bag like evidence. Before noon, Deputy Lopez rolled up, took the bag, took my statement, and left me with a card and an incident number, small things that felt like a rope tossed into a current. You could say that was the inciting incident, but the truth is it was just the first mask slipping. 2 nights later, somebody moved my survey stakes. Not by accident, not kicked or nudged. Relocated. 5 feet into my footprint, like a surgeon's careful cut. I didn't see it happen. What I saw was the damage. String lines once taut now drifting over scrub. June didn't curse. She grabbed a notepad, wrote the time, date, temperature, and wind direction because chain of custody Googled it starts with simple facts. Then she looked at me with that steady gaze I married her for and said, "We're going to do this like a lab." We installed cameras. Not just a couple slapped on a post-redundant power, LTE failover, motion alerts that pinged June's phone with the sort of insistence a child uses when a cookie jar is open. She mapped the property like she was dressing a stage, coverage overlapping, angles crisscrossing so tight, even a rabbit would file a complaint. Our little site trailer turned into a war room. Monitors, a whiteboard with timelines, a binder of printouts labeled evidence in the block letters of a person trying to believe the world is still rational. We didn't have to wait long. On a Friday morning, when the wind felt like November brushing the back of your neck, a concrete mixer growled its way up the drive, and there right at the pinch point where the gravel narrows stood 2 men in orange vests waving traffic wands like bored airport staff. One was heavy-set with a beard that made its own weather. The other had a jaw that looked figured on a blueprint. "Road closed," Beard said. "For safety." "Whose safety?" I asked. "Community," Blueprint said, and then he smiled and pointed at the mixer. "You can back that down. We'll allow it." The driver kid out of Paso with a music note tattoo peeking from his sleeve looked at me like, "Do I do this, or do I lose my job?" I told him to keep it running and stepped toward the men. "You don't have authority here," I said. Beard's breath smelled like menthol and righteous indignation. He put a hand on my shoulder as if we were acquaintances. I took it off. He shoved me. Eyes in the mixer's cab went wide. The first punch surprised me less than the second, the one I didn't see. Then June's voice, this tight, bright wire cut through everything. "Miles, back up." Behind her, a phone lifted. "You're on camera," she said, and something in Beard's expression told me he was used to being the guy holding the lens. They left, but they left enough cones and presents that the driver decided he couldn't risk it. By afternoon, that load set up in the drum, and we signed a receipt for a few $1,000s of hard-earned nothing. "Documented," June said again, not unkind, just focused, and the next morning Deputy Lopez came back for a second statement. "I'll be talking to people," he said, almost apologetically, the way a doctor warns a child about a shot. That weekend, the cameras caught more. Two silhouettes in hoodies at 1:17 a.m., voices low as creek water, moving our stakes again, measuring off the distance from a paint-splashed Joshua tree we'd marked on our map. And at 12:03 the next night, a figure I recognized even from behind Blueprint Jaw, the certain walk of a man who thinks the rules are for neighbors scrooched by the power box. The feed went black for 18 seconds. Then a backup battery clicked, and the system rebirthed itself with a little digital gasp, and there he was, startled by his own reflection in the lens, caught in a mid-level megapixel lie. By Monday, June had the clips spliced with timestamps, cross-referenced with a log of motion alerts, and printed stills with circles drawn in red Sharpie, because juries, she said, like red. She asked me to breathe, to stop pacing, to fix the small things, the squeak in the trailer door, the light that buzzed when it warmed, because we're going to win this by being boring. We hired a licensed surveyor who came with a laser tripod that made everyone behave, and we paid a GIS tech to run a sightline model that took into account topography, roof pitch, and the absurdly romantic concept of a view cone. The report said our ridge house would nibble at the bottom right corner of Sunset A for exactly 4 minutes each day in winterless than the HOA's 3-story clubhouse down the hill, which had, somehow, never endangered anyone's sky. It might have stayed a grim little trench war if not for the emails. They arrived from a burner account that made my stomach drop because righteousness tends to come wrapped in trouble, and what they contained was, in its way, pure. Board members of Mesa Ridge, including Sylvia, chatting in the casual code of people who believe they're right. "Get a Marshall-looking jacket," one wrote. "Make it scary." Another, "He needs to feel it financially hit delivery days." Sylvia's reply, short, "Whatever it takes. We have a mandate." I read that line 3 times because I wanted to be furious, but mostly felt tired. "They wrote it down," June said softly. "People always do." Deputy Lopez looked like a man who'd seen the emails before he opened them. He arranged his face neutral, took the printouts, and said, "I'll be in touch." We hired a lawyer named Whitaker who wore boots polished by someone meticulous and had the conversational habit of putting facts down like bricks. "Civil conspiracy," he said. "Assault, impersonation, vandalism, interference with business." He pushed his glasses up with a finger that had ink stains on it and added, "Let's get you across the finish line." Do you believe in turning points? I didn't. Not as a builder would. Doesn't care about the drama of story. It cares about load paths. But even I could feel the momentum change the night we hosted what June called Sunset for everybody. We strung a sheet between 2 sawhorses, made lemonade and chili for anyone who'd eat it, and screened a cut of our footage for neighbors who'd been told we were thieves. Folks stood with arms crossed at first, then hands came out of pockets. Then an older woman I recognized from the sign at the bottom of the hill laughed when the fake marshal tripped because it meant he was human after all. Sylvia watched from a car parked half a block down, silhouette frozen. A man named Ethan Colquiet always waved when he jogged past, stepped forward, and said, not loud but clear, "This isn't who we are." It still surprises me how much power a sentence has when the right person chooses it. Court came on a Wednesday that smelled like rain but didn't deliver any. The HOA hired a litigator from the city, a man with cufflinks that could start small fires. He brought a foam board model of Mesa Ridge painted pale blue with little sun icons drawn in gold marker to show sacred view corridors. When the judge asked about the red tag, the litigator said it was a misunderstanding, and then, with a flourish, called the tag symbolic theater meant to pause hostilities. If you've ever watched a grown man explain a lie like it's a courtesy, you know the room grows cold. Deputy Lopez took the stand, unspooled the timeline, waited out the HOA's objections without flinching. The surveyor testified with the tranquil confidence of a person who knows math doesn't care about anyone's feelings. The GIS tech showed a rendering that made even the bailiff lean forward. And then Whitaker placed the printed emails on an overhead projector so the words, "Make it scary," filled the screen, large enough to read from the back row. Sylvia's face didn't move. Mine did. I felt something unclench a tightness I'd been carrying since the first meeting on my gravel drive loosen a fraction. The judge took off his glasses, set them down like a man who wants to separate looking from seeing, and said, almost sadly, "We are not going to do this to people." He dismissed the HOA's claims with prejudice, awarded us costs and damages, referred the impersonation and assault to the district attorney, and added sanctions that made the litigators blink like they'd been splashed. When his gavel tapped, it was gentle, as if he understood we'd all been through a version of the same foolish storm. You want a triumphant ending? We got one, sort of. The fake marshal made a deal. The two men who moved stakes and blocked the mixer Rick and Barker, I learned, took pleas and fines and community service that involved trash bags and a grabber on the county highway. Sylvia was removed from the board, barred from serving on any in the county for a stretch of years that felt earned, and ordered to issue a public apology 39 seconds long, read into a microphone in the Mesa Ridge clubhouse, filmed for the people she'd convinced to be angry on her behalf. She read it clean, voice steady, but when she reached the line about whatever it takes, her jaw tightened, and, for a second, I recognized the traveler in her, the person who believed deeply that she was defending something elemental. If I'm honest, I don't think she learned what we wanted her to. I think she learned the system around her limits. We finished the house in spring. The last pane of glass slid into its black metal frame, a bead of sealant smoothed under my thumb, and suddenly there it was, a room that swallowed light and exhaled quiet. June set a plant on the sill and said, "Now we get to live here." We invited Mesa Ridge over. Ethan brought his guitar, someone brought a pie. Kids ran a loop from deck to yard until the path in the grass looked like a sketch. At sunset, the sky turned that staged kind of orange cities pay tourism boards to describe, and no one's view was stolen. People clapped when the sun finally kissed the ridge because we'd all survived something silly and serious at once. It felt like a blessing without the speech. But an ending is never an ending. A month later, a flyer showed up in our mailbox, no return address, printed in the grainy gray of an office copier doing its best. It proposed a new Community Views Alliance, independent of the HOA, non-binding but persuasive, a committee to recommend neighborhood-friendly design. It used words like harmony and respect and tradition, and I could feel in its careful phrasing the same old wish to make one person's line on a map run a little wider, a little softer, a little more convenient. I held the paper up to the afternoon light and thought about the fact that people don't walk around as villains in their own stories. They walk around as guardians of whatever hurt they're afraid to feel again. June watched me read and said, "We'll show up. We'll be boring. We'll be kind. We'll be firm." And I laughed because that was the whole playbook. So here's what I know now, standing in a house that almost lived only on paper. Rules matter, but only when they're written down and shared. Neighbors matter, but only when they talk to each other without hiding behind committees and clipboards. And cameras, much as I'd love to be the guy who believes they're unnecessary, matter when people convince themselves that whatever it takes is a virtue. I learned that doing a thing right doesn't protect you from the people who think you're right blocks their sunset. And I learned that you can fight with documentation and patience and still go to bed angry some nights anyway. The work doesn't end with a gavel. It ends when folks stop needing one. If you were me, if you'd watched a stranger staple a lie to your framing, if you'd been shoved on your own driveway and told your home was a theft, would you forgive quicker than I did? Or would you dig in deeper? Does a community have the right to ask for a piece of your sky? Or is that just power dressed in nicer language? Drop your take in the comments. Tell me where the line is between community standards and control. Tell me if I got it right or if Sylvia did. And if you've ever had to fight for your own little view of the world, share your story. And if this hit a nerve, send it to the one neighbor who needs to hear it, because we either learn how to live side by side or we learn, the hard way, what it costs when we don't.